The story of the Kosovo War is complex, a tapestry woven with threads of history, identity, and conflict that stretched over decades. To truly understand what happened in the late 1990s, we have to go back a little further. For a long time, Kosovo was an autonomous province within Yugoslavia. What made it unique was its population. The majority were ethnic Albanians, with a smaller Serb minority. This arrangement, however, wasn't destined to last. In 1989, a pivotal shift occurred. Slobodan Milošević, the leader of Serbia, made a decision that would send shockwaves through the region. He revoked Kosovo's autonomy. Imagine having a degree of self-governance, a sense of control over your local affairs, and then suddenly having it stripped away. For the ethnic Albanians in Kosovo, this wasn't just a political maneuver. It felt like a direct assault on their identity and rights. Resentment began to simmer, and the seeds of conflict were sown. The situation quickly became a powder keg of ethnic polarization. On one side, you had the Albanian majority, who felt increasingly marginalized and oppressed. Their demands ranged from the restoration of their rights to full-blown independence. They saw their future as separate from Serbian rule. On the other side, Serbia viewed Kosovo through a different lens. For Serbs, Kosovo was not just a piece of land. It was the heartland of their national and religious history, home to ancient monasteries and significant historical sites. This deep-seated connection meant they were unwilling to let it go. The stage was set for a clash of two powerful, competing narratives. As tensions escalated throughout the 1990s, a new force emerged from the shadows: the Kosovo Liberation Army, or KLA. Frustrated with the lack of progress through peaceful resistance, the KLA, they believed that only through armed struggle could they achieve their goal of an independent Kosovo. Starting in the mid-90s, they began to organize and launch guerrilla-style attacks. Their targets were primarily Serbian police and government officials, symbols of the authority they sought to overthrow. The KLA's strategy was to make Kosovo ungovernable for Serbia. By disrupting state control and demonstrating their military capability, they hoped to rally more support from the Albanian population and attract international attention. And it worked out. As the KLA grew bolder and its attacks became more frequent, it gained a reputation as the primary force fighting for Kosovo's independence. However, their actions also dramatically raised the stakes. Each attack prompted a response, creating a vicious cycle of violence that pushed the region closer to all-out war. The rise of the KLA did not go unanswered. Slobodan Milošević and the Serbian government viewed the KLA not as freedom fighters, but as terrorists threatening the territorial integrity of Yugoslavia. His response was decisive and forceful. He significantly bolstered the presence of Serbian police and Yugoslav army units in Kosovo, with the clear objective of crushing the rebellion. According to reports from organizations like Human Rights Watch, these forces were operating under Milošević's direct influence, carrying out his strategy on the ground. The Serbian tactics were characterized by overwhelming force. Instead of surgical strikes against KLA fighters, their operations often became large-scale crackdowns that targeted entire communities. The line between a KLA sympathizer and an ordinary Albanian civilian became dangerously blurred. Military operations were launched to reclaim territory held by the KLA, but these campaigns frequently involved actions that international observers would later condemn. The Serbian response was not just a police action. It was a military campaign aimed at reasserting total control, and it brought immense suffering to the people of Kosovo. By the summer and fall of 1998, the conflict had escalated dramatically. In September, Yugoslav and Serbian forces launched a massive military offensive. This wasn't just a series of small skirmishes anymore. It was a coordinated effort to systematically dismantle the KLA's strongholds and regain control over the rebellious province. The goal was to crush the separatist movement once and for all. The operation was sweeping and brutal. The tactics were methodical. Serbian forces would cordon off entire villages, cutting them off from the outside world. They would then launch attacks on suspected KLA bases within those areas. Heavy artillery and tanks were often used, leading to widespread destruction. Intensive military patrols became a constant presence, creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation for the civilian population. Reports from the ground described a pattern of forced displacement, with thousands of Albanians fleeing their homes to escape the violence. The 1998 offensive marked a turning point, transforming a low-level insurgency into a full-scale humanitarian crisis. Then, in January 19, an event occurred that would horrify the world and become a critical catalyst for international intervention. The Razak massacre. In the small village of Razak, 45 ethnic Albanian civilians were killed. The images that emerged were shocking: babies lying in a ravine, many of them older men, and even a young boy. It was a scene of utter brutality. The Serbian government immediately went on the defensive. Their official story was that the dead were all KLA fighters killed in a legitimate battle. They claimed the scene had been staged to frame their forces and garner international sympathy. However, this narrative quickly fell apart. International observers, including a team led by U.S. diplomat William Walker, arrived at the scene. After examining the bodies and speaking to survivors, they concluded that the vast majority of the victims were unarmed civilians, executed at close range. The Razak massacre became a symbol of the atrocities being committed in Kosovo. It was undeniable proof for many in the international community that Milosevic's campaign was not simply about fighting a rebellion, but about terrorizing a civilian population. The event dramatically heightened diplomatic pressure on Belgrade. It was cited repeatedly by Western leaders as evidence of a policy of ethnic cleansing, and became a key justification for the military action that would follow. Razak was the point of no return, the moment the world could no longer look away. The Kosovo War remains a deeply painful chapter in modern European history, leaving scars that are still healing today. It's a stark reminder of how historical grievances and political ambitions can erupt into devastating conflict, with ordinary people paying the ultimate price. Understanding this history is not just about looking at the past. It's about learning the lessons needed to build a more peaceful future. The international community, watching with growing alarm, knew it had to act. But would diplomacy be enough? The stage was set in a French castle, Rambalay, where world leaders gathered with Serbian and Kosovo Albanian representatives. The goal was to hammer out a peace deal. The proposed agreement was complex. It offered Kosovo significant autonomy within Yugoslavia and called for the deployment of NATO peacekeepers to ensure the deal held. The Kosovo Albanian delegation, led by the KLA, reluctantly signed, seeing it as the only path forward. However, the Yugoslav delegation, under the firm direction of Slobodan Milosevic, refused. They saw the demand for NATO troops on their soil as an unacceptable violation of sovereignty, essentially an occupation. With the stroke of a pen, or rather, the lack of one, the final hope for a peaceful resolution evaporated. The talks collapsed, and the world held its breath. The path was now clear for a military intervention that had been threatened for months. On the evening of March 24, 1999, the skies over Yugoslavia lit up with fire. NATO launched Operation Allied Force. The mission's stated objective was clear: to halt the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Kosovo and compel Milosevic to withdraw his forces. For 78 days, NATO jets and cruise missiles struck strategic targets across Serbia and Kosovo. The campaign focused on military infrastructure, air defense systems, command centers, army barracks, and bridges. The idea was to cripple Milosevic's war machine without committing ground troops, a politically risky move for NATO member states. However, the intervention was controversial from the start. It was launched without the explicit authorization of the United Nations Security Council, as Russia and China, allies of Serbia, were certain to veto any such resolution. This raised profound questions about international law and the right to intervene in the affairs of a sovereign nation, even in the face of gross human rights violations. The debate over the legality and morality of the bombing campaign continues to this day. As NATO bombs fell, the situation on the ground in Kosovo descended into a new level of horror. In what appeared to be a coordinated and brutal campaign of retaliation, Serbian police, army units, and paramilitaries accelerated their campaign of ethnic cleansing. This was Operation Horseshoe, a systematic plan to expel the ethnic Albanian population from Kosovo. Hundreds of thousands of people were driven from their homes at gunpoint. They were herded onto trains, buses, or forced to walk 4 miles towards the borders of Albania and North Macedonia. Eyewitness accounts from this period are harrowing. Families were separated, their identity documents were seized and destroyed, and they were told never to return. The goal was not just to displace them, but to erase their very presence from the land. Human rights organizations documented widespread atrocities. Summary: mass killings and the systematic destruction of Albanian property and cultural sites. The world watched in shock as a massive refugee crisis exploded on Europe's doorstep. Tiny neighboring countries like Albania and North Macedonia were overwhelmed by the sudden influx of desperate, traumatized people. International aid agencies scrambled to set up massive refugee camps, providing food, shelter, and medical care to over 800,000 people who had been violently uprooted from their lives. It was a humanitarian disaster on a scale not seen in Europe since World War II. For 78 days, the standoff continued. NATO's air campaign intensified, expanding its target list to include government buildings in Belgrade and infrastructure like power plants and television stations. The pressure on Milosevic was immense, both from the relentless bombing and from growing diplomatic isolation. Finally, in early June 1999, he blinked through Finnish and Russian intermediaries. Milosevic agreed to all of NATO's demands. He consented to a complete withdrawal of all Serbian military, police, and paramilitary forces from Kosovo. The end of the conflict was formalized with the Kumanovo Agreement, a military technical deal signed between NATO and the Yugoslav army. It laid out a precise timetable for the Serbian withdrawal and the simultaneous entry of an international peacekeeping force. Hot on its heels came United Nations Security Council Resolution 1244. This crucial resolution established the legal framework for the post-war era. It placed Kosovo under temporary UN administration, creating a mission known as UNMIK, and authorized the deployment of a robust, NATO-led peacekeeping force called KFOR. KFOR's job was to maintain security, oversee the demilitarization of the KLA, and facilitate the safe return of refugees. As Serbian tanks and troops rolled out of Kosovo, KFOR soldiers rolled in, greeted as liberators by the returning Albanian population. A new chapter for Kosovo had begun, one managed by the international community. At the center of this maelstrom of violence and diplomacy stood one man, Slobodan Milosevic. He was widely seen by the international community as the chief architect of the Balkan Wars of the 1990s. And his actions in Kosovo were considered the final, brutal chapter. His refusal to negotiate in good faith and his governance, orchestration of the ethnic cleansing campaign, made him a pariah. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, or ICTY, had already been investigating his role in the wars in Croatia and Bosnia. During the NATO bombing campaign, the tribunal took the unprecedented step of indicting a sitting head of state, charging Milosevic with crimes against humanity and war crimes committed in Kosovo. Following his fall from power in Serbia in 2000, he was arrested and transferred to The Hague to stand trial. His trial was a landmark event, a global effort to hold a national leader accountable for mass atrocities. Milosevic died in his cell in 2006 before a verdict could be reached, but the evidence presented painted a damning picture of his responsibility. In the years following the war, Kosovo remained under UN administration. Then, in February 2008, Kosovo's parliament declared independence from Serbia. This move was recognized by the United States and most European Union countries, but fiercely rejected by Serbia and its allies, including Russia. Today, Kosovo's sovereignty is still a point of contention, and the relationship between Belgrade and Pristina remains tense, a lingering echo of the conflict that reshaped this corner of Europe. The scars of war are deep, but the story of Kosovo is also one of resilience and the enduring quest for self-determination. Thank you so much for watching. The history of this region is incredibly complex, and it's important we continue to learn about these events and their lasting impact. If you found this video informative, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into modern history.